Radio Nasty!
Todd Schorr was born in 1954 in New York City and grew up in Oakland, New Jersey, playing in bands in the late 60s and early 70s. Schorr fell under the spell of the psychedelic concert posters coming out of San Francisco and underground comics.
Let's see. Like a lot of kids, I always had an interest in drawing from a real early age. And very early on, my parents, took an interest in my drawing, and they put me in Saturday morning art classes when I was around 5 years old. And so right off the bat, I started to get some training. Early on, I guess my influences primarily came from, and I think the thing that drew me into visual art was, watching television. Probably, growing up in the late 50s, one of the first generations that really was of children that really had that constant eye of the TV in the room and just absorbing all that information, especially for a child. The cartoons, they were old cartoons. I like old cartoons from the 1930s, Max Fleischer type stuff, and also the early monster movies like King Kong. So that was real early on. And a little later, another thing that really grabbed my attention was they had a big retrospective of Salvador Dali. Now, this was 1966. I would have been 12 years old. So at that age, it was like, Jesus, just overwhelming. I mean, as a child, I can relate to it on the level of it seeming like a cartoon, cartoonish. But there was that undercurrent of eroticism and everything else. It really pulled me in. And so I became aware of Salvador Dali, and actually on my own started to investigate the early surrealists and things. So early on, I kind of had that. Then a little later on, when I was in high school, 1970, I had the opportunity to go to Europe for the summer. And at that point, I was doing a lot of drawings that were very cartoon-inspired, comic book looking, kind of like the Mad Magazine meets Walt Disney kind of stuff. And when I went to Europe, and started going to a lot of the big museums over there and seeing firsthand the old master paintings. So I started to think, I remember when I was at the Uffizi Gallery in Florence, I thought, geez, what if you could paint like an old master, but you painted paintings about cartoons and stuff? Could that be done? And so that's when I kind of germ of that idea started in my mind, and it wouldn't be until 15 or so years later that it finally came to fruition. But that was the genesis of that. That kind of set me on that road to what I'm doing now. Now along the way, after I graduated from high school, I went to Philadelphia College of Art. And I entered in the art school wanting to be a painter, because at that point, I didn't know the difference between Norman Rockwell or Salvador Dali. I wasn't real aware of the difference between the so-called fine arts and the commercial arts. But when I got to art school, that was really defined for me. And most of my first-year art teachers said, you'd be better off in the illustration department. So I thought, okay, because I knew that illustration meant album covers, magazine covers, books, and things like that. And I thought, well, that'd be cool. And plus the fact that, like you mentioned in that introduction, I was inspired by the San Francisco poster artists, like in the late 60s, like Rick Griffin and Moscoso. And also the other, I should go back, and the other big influence at that time, when in high school, and around the same time that I was in Europe, was the underground comic book movement. Robert Crumb, Robert Williams, and like I said, Griffin, and all those guys. That stuff really just blew the roof off the possibilities of what could be done with cartoon comic book type art. While I was in college, I started to get work doing illustration, and then by the time I got out, I already had a representative in New York. And it wouldn't be until a few years later when I started to realize that the creative limitations to commercial art, the fact that I still wanted to do personal work and didn't have enough time to do that. At that time, the whole, I don't know what you call lowbrow, pop surrealism, juxtaposed school was just getting started. I had met and became friends with Robert Williams, and he was very encouraging and helpful in the beginning. You could see that I had, the talent. It just felt like it was being squandered on commercial work instead of commercial. So between his encouragement, and there was also a seminal show in the mid-'80s in 1986 at the Lafayette Museum in Tokyo, Japan. It was eventually called American Pop Culture Images Today. They flew about a dozen of us over to Tokyo. For us, it really was a galvanizing experience. Just being able to hang out and trade off ideas, just this feeling of camaraderie that, and again, it's not like it is now. I mean, now there is like a whole network that's been established through magazines like Juxtapose, and the internet changed everything. I mean, all of a sudden, it's so easy to come to art school, plug into whatever kind of field you want to get into, some of the websites and everything else happens. But you're talking about, like the mid to 1980s, there was no internet per se, and there wasn't a Juxtapose yet or anything. And none of us knew that there was no money involved. I mean, that's the thing. The thing that I think is a shame, but a good thing is on the one hand, money has come into this art world like it does to every art movement. Eventually you get deep pocket collectors that really help push it along. But the nice thing about it was at the time when there was no money and no one thought there wasn't going to reap any big financial rewards from it, it was just like we all felt like this is just so important that what we're doing. Robert Williams, he was lucky if he could get $1,000 for a painting back then. If you were making $1,500 or $2,000, if you sold a painting at that price, you were like on top of the heap at that point for our little world. Now, of course, it's nothing, but so this is what you're dealing. And my wife Kathy and I, we're coming from this hardcore commercial background where you're making, I don't know, maybe $3,000, $4,000, $6,000 a job for maybe 2 afternoons of work, and then you're putting a couple of weeks into a painting that you're going to get $1,000. A lot of our illustrator friends at that point thought we were out of our minds to be turning down commercial work and wanting to paint. But again, it was, you're an artist. It's coming from something deep down inside. It's not a calculated thing like now. I hate to say it, but there are young artists that see what's selling, what type of imagery is selling, and they do the same goddamn thing. And because it's like they want to create a little career for themselves and be some kind of mini celebrity. And I question. And then on the other hand, I think younger artists don't have this stigma about commercial art. It's like wherever they can get their work in whatever venue and by any whatever means, they're okay with it. If they have to make a few compromises, fine. I came from, again, this hardcore illustration background and got so fed up and sick with the creative restrictions that to this day, I won't take a commercial art job. I don't want any advertiser coming to me and say, hey, we love your stuff, it's really hip, and we want you to do this kind of thing. And it's like, no, I won't give them the satisfaction. If someone wants to come and use something, a license thing, depending on the product, but there's certain companies I won't give my artwork to. It's just, it's like at least you have that. It's like, why does everybody got to be a sellout? It's like if you're making a decent living, I'm making a decent living, I'm not making a killing. And that's all I ever dreamed of being able to do. And once you have that, you tasted that complete freedom to do whatever you want to do, you can't go back. I can't. I get just incensed with that kind of thing because it's the stupidity of it. It's like, we love it, but the green is just a little too green, and just these bullshit changes that they give you. It's just, I can't. that's a reflection of my years in advertising. And it's basically, the obvious pun here is that it's the hydra. It's a hydra. And a hydra, of course, is a mythological beast that you cut one head off and two will grow back. So it's like in the advertising world, it's like no matter how many heads you cut off or how many companies go under, there's always new ones popping up. And then this thing is just this never-ending parade of, stupid cartoon characters. I mean, I picked everything that kind of I do like, though. I mean, just in terms of graphic enjoyment, there's no real new trademarks or logos. It's all kind of mid-60s kind of stuff.
Actually, good history painting and advertising.
Yeah, but it's kind of a historical documentation in a way. And it's kind of like what the series of paintings that the one in the back there, the Spectre of Cartoon Appeal, and the things and weirdos put in back there, they are kind of, in my twisted sensibility, a throwback to the academic paintings of the 1800s that were, that artists like Jerome and would paint that had to do with mythology, and in some cases, military history or just historical things. And I just thought, well, I can kind of paint realistically. Wouldn't it be kind of funny to put these, all these pop culture things into these, presented in a formal, historical painted, format. And it's kind of the Hydra Madison Avenues, along those lines. And a couple others in the show are the same series I was doing over a period of a few years. And, things that obviously influenced and had an impact on me. I put into these works. As far as I knew, up to that point, no one was doing anything like that, trying to, come along with this higher intention of like, well, why couldn't this be in the Louvre? Why not? It's elaborate paintings that maybe you would have seen in Mad Magazine in the 1950s, or something. But just, trying to take the technical facility to a little different level, and again, try to create interesting dynamic compositions with it that didn't stand in a museum.
And these are works that you've made in California. You moved here in 2001?
We've actually moved out here in 1999. Primarily, though, just the attitude in California has always been a lot more open to innovation and change and different things than I feel. I'm originally born and raised in the East Coast, and I just feel like the West Coast always just had this much more open, experimental attitude about everything, lifestyle, art, and everything else. In the late 90s, and just around 2000, it really started, our whole little world started to change. I mean, Juxtapose had come along and started to create a real good base for this type of artwork and to give us a forum, show our work. Regular people could relate to this stuff. And, I still say that, again, the museums are starting to, show this kind of work, but the really big museums got to really, seriously assess this stuff and put shows together. I know they bring a tremendous audience that normally would never visit a museum, because quite honestly, when I go into a lot of museums, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. It's like, half of it is just so uninteresting. And if you're someone that truly appreciates imagery, lots of times there's not much there to grasp. It's just big kind of vague statements. This is basically, you take away all the pretense of the fine art world and you just put visual art in front of the average person. These are kind of things I think that the average person would gravitate towards. I don't think that a lot of talking and manifestos about theories and things, whatever it is behind a lot of conceptual work, it just doesn't really sink in on to people. It doesn't really mean much except a very small handful of, I like work that, and I guess this is coming from being influenced by movies and stuff. I really like visuals that give you that little bit of a chill, and when I'm standing in front of like a really impressive painting, if I get that just little slight chill, little hair standing up on the back of your neck, you just get that charge of that's great.